Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Welcome to Kansas City Profiles, presented by Easton Roofing, and a special catch-up with Bob Walkenhorst, iconic Kansas City musician, past of the Rainmakers, and still occasionally, and of course does all kinds of amazing projects, and you can find a lot of what he does at patreon.com/Bob Walkenhorst, and he'll catch us up to date with all of that. And last time I saw Bob, just was saying to him, I don't know if he saw me, but was the New Year's Eve Rainmakers concert at the end of 2019, headed into 2020. Of course, we've all had to navigate many, many things, but you certainly have used your time productively, my man. It's great to talk to you again.
Well, you too, Danny. You know the old saying that if you're self-employed, your boss is an a-hole. Well, that kind of served me well during the pandemic and the shutdown, in that almost everything I do is self-contained, from my music to my writing to my painting. You know, no one's going to make me do it but me. So I kind of took the pandemic time and got busy on some projects that I had been on my bucket list that I'd always wanted to do, and it was kind of one of those, you know, it's now or never. This is the perfect, absolutely imperfect opportunity to do some things that you've been putting off. Just
a real quick aside for the music community as well. Everybody tried to maneuver in their own way, and you certainly seem to have done it quite successfully, at least from my purview. But it's been hard for musicians trying to just navigate streaming, and also not just musicians, but people who are involved in the music business in areas like doing sound and things like that. It's been rough.
Yeah, particularly, like you said, for the clubs and the venues the shutdown, I don't know. I remember I heard the percentage, but there are so many clubs and venues that just won't come back, and that's really tragic. I think most of the Kansas City ones have survived. The ones that were kind of the showcase clubs around Kansas City have survived by just being smart and figuring out ways around it and pushing on through. But yeah, it's been tough. It's been particularly tough for young musicians. I mean, a guy who's been doing it as long as I have been doing it, I kind of created some other avenues for my music to get out, for income to come in, and but like my daughter Una, who had just finished and released her first EP, or her new EP, in 2019, and was putting plans together to go out and see the country and play shows and all that stuff. And she's one of thousands and thousands that same thing happened to, whose career was just starting, and they had to they didn't have other plans to turn to. So I really feel for the young musicians. I also feel for the clubs and the sound engineers and all that too. But I think they're going to be okay in Kansas City coming back.
You actually have done a couple of albums since the pandemic in 2020 and 2021, and tell us a little bit about those projects.
Well, I think there's only one, but I put out a solo album in 2003. That was my first solo album. And just 1 month ago, I put out my second solo album. So in 18 years between solo albums, I think that's a good, everyone should put 18 years between their solo albums. That way you're kind of guaranteed it'll be a pretty good record. But yeah, I spent 2020, you mentioned Patreon at the beginning of our conversation. Patreon is Patreon, and it is a service for musicians where their listeners, their fans, can subscribe to that artist, and the monthly subscription becomes a very important part of the support income for an artist to keep doing what you hope people want you to do. So I send out a new song every single month to my patrons, and it's available nowhere else except to my patrons. But after a year of that, I did that all through 2020, my patrons encouraged me to send it out to the rest of the world. So those are the songs that I released June 1st, 2021. My new album is 1,000 Words, and it's available in a physical CD. It's also available on all the streaming things, and you can find it most everywhere that you find things online. Also, you can find it at my website, and I'll send you an autographed copy.
That sounds absolutely great. And I've follow you on Facebook and get to keep up with you that way. I have a Patreon site as well, and it certainly does help in many ways. But most of my content is free, but there are certain exclusive things that are on Patreon. And you do a lot of different things there, but at different levels, paintings, and we'll get into your book of short stories here in a minute. But there are various different ways people can engage with you.
Yeah, I try to make it to where if you just want to hear my new song each month, well, that's something, it'll cost you less than a beer. But if you want to support me at a slightly higher level than that, well, you can get an art print after a year, or you can get an original painting, or if you really want to go whole hog here, I will come to your house and play an acoustic concert for you at a certain price level. So yeah, I give people a bunch of those options, and yeah, a lot of people have gone for different ways. It's been a pleasant surprise to see how supportive my longtime fans have been. And I hate using the word fans. I think of them as friends. They have certainly kept my life comfortable and productive. And thank you, my friends. I will keep going as long as you want me to.
You mentioned Bucket List, and you also, in 2020 and into this year, published a book of short stories, and it's a very interesting concept, short stories that sort of have an overarching theme. Well, they're different short stories, but they're all very much interconnected. Yeah,
that really was a bucket list thing. I've always had a huge admiration and sense of mystery about people who can write books. I mean, the writing I've spent my life doing, it takes about a half an hour to an hour to finish a song. You can get it done in a good half hour, and when it's all finished, it's 3.5 minutes long. How do you write something that's 200 or 300 pages or more? And how do you stick that out? How do you maintain the focus to get that done? I just never understood. And I've met quite a few writers over the years who have had various levels of success, and it just has always amazed me. And so when the pandemic set in and it was clear that I was not going to be going out playing music anywhere, I thought, okay, give it a try. And writing long form, even though it is short stories, it still goes on for several hundred pages, is a whole different thing than music. Music, you're looking for that spark, and you fan the spark, and it bursts into a little flame, and you roast your marshmallow, and it's done. But long form writing, it's a mysterious journey. And so I wrote these stories. I grew up in a small town about an hour east of Kansas City, Norburn, Missouri, which was about 1,000 people when I was growing up. It's down to about 700 now. And it was a great place to grow up. Really interesting characters, really strange low frequencies there. All these things going on under the surface. And while my childhood was quite happy, as I grew up, I realized that in all small towns, there's a lot of different levels of existence. And so I tried to write about some of those complexities of small town life. And back in 1965, we actually had an event in Norburn called Whirlybird Day, where a helicopter, and at that time, nobody in my town had even seen a helicopter before. A helicopter comes to town and gives rides, but the big event is they drop hundreds of ping pong balls over the center of town. All these ping pong balls have a number on them, and you can then redeem your number for prizes or groceries or various things, or free rides in the helicopter. So that's the connecting thing between the stories. It's all these different people and what happens to them on that day. It was great fun to write. It was like getting in a time machine and going back to my childhood. The process of trying to write about something that actually happened, but you're going into fiction with it, you're going into imagination, conjured up so many memories for me that it really was like getting in the time machine every day that I worked on it. I only hear the good reviews, so you never know. But I worked real hard on the book, and I think it's entertaining. It's not funny. Now, there's a few funny moments, but it's an unusual little group of stories without being sensational at any level. It's not a whodunit. It's just these little observations of small lives and all the huge things that go on inside of small lives.
Now that we are at least starting to get out of the pandemic, what do you see over the horizon as far as getting back out and playing and doing things like that?
Well, my return to live performance is August 28th, I think. Let me make sure I get the date right. The Rainmakers are performing a free concert at Johnson County Community College on the 27th, Friday the 27th of August. And I am not performing until then. I had to make a decision several months ago about when I was going to start putting dates on the calendar. And of course, several months ago, we didn't quite know how this was going to go. And even right now, we don't really, with the Delta variant out, we don't really know how this is going to go. I hope everything's clear at the end of August. But yeah, the Rainmakers outside at Johnson County Community College, free concert. And then I get back out and start doing some solo gigs in September and October. So yeah, it's still a couple months away for me.
Sounds very cool. And coming up next, you heard Bob reference his childhood in Norburn, Missouri, and we will talk about that and many, many other things in our conversation from a couple of years ago that we revisit here. It's great catching up with you, Bob, and I'll talk to you again soon.
You too, Danny. Thanks so much.
Bob Walkenhorst and much more straight ahead on Kansas City Profiles, presented by Easton Roofing.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
I'm here with Joe Spiker, owner of Easton Roofing, and boy, we had to negotiate a million things in 2020, but Easton Roofing navigated them all. As 2021 rolls out, what should we expect this coming storm season?
Well, Danny, it'll be the same thing as it is every year. The storms come, and you've got the guys out knocking on doors offering quote-unquote free inspections. Be wary as a homeowner. If somebody's knocking on your door, they probably need the work, and if they need the work that bad, they may be willing to do something untoward to get it. So if somebody knocks on your door, says they want to give you a free inspection, just tell them have a great day and give us a call. We'll come out for free and give you a good, honest opinion as to whether or not you need to do anything at all with your roof.
And what's the best way to get in touch with Easton Roofing?
You can always find us online at eastonroofing.com or give us a call at 913-257-5426.
Easton Roofing. Integrity matters. Time to spend a few minutes with my good friend Jeff Dillon from Dillon's Heating and Cooling. And Jeff, what differentiates your company from others in the industry?
Plain and simple, we're honest. We have integrity, and we're going to do things right the first time. There's way too many companies out there that lie, cheat, hide things from the homeowner or customer, and we're not about that. It's kind of funny sometimes. I actually am so honest with some people, it kind of surprises them, but sometimes it's good for business, sometimes it's bad for business, but ultimately it's the kind of business that I want to run, is an honest one.
And that family way of treating things is part of your slogan, and it's also part of one of your great features that you offer to customers.
Our slogan is like family. Our most popular maintenance plan is called the Family Plan. It's very similar to a lot of ones out there. The little tweak that we do to ours, 1% off for every 2 years. They have a continued maintenance plan with us. If they have a maintenance plan for 10 years, then we give them 5% off. No questions asked.
You can find out more about Dillon's Heating and Cooling and all their great range of services at dillonsheatingandcooling.com. That's Dillon's with an S. The phone number, 913-214-1343. Cinematic Visions has been an affordable solution for professional media production in Kansas City since 2003, offering award-winning video production and creation, as well as a wide array of digital and social media management services. From planning, scripting, filming, editing, and post-production, to delivering your product to a watching world, Cinematic Visions will provide professional and affordable services for you and your business with the necessary return on investment to make it all worthwhile. Cinematic Vision's goal is to unlock the power of storytelling through video and a strong online presence for your company. Beyond the numbers, they want to inspire and evoke your clients to feel and act. Let my friends at Cinematic Visions embed your brand where it belongs, in your customers' minds. You can find them online at cinematicvisions.com or with a quick phone call at 816-600-6300. Let's have a brief conversation with David Schmidt from Pro Millennial. David, what differentiates you from other financial organizations?
I would say the passion we have for seeing our clients succeed is probably paramount to what we do here. There's no joy greater than watching a client accumulate wealth. I had a client that I've had for many years was able to buy his dream warehouse. Nothing too extravagant, but we had a savings plan in place and was able to see him fulfill his dreams.
And what else motivates you in this industry?
Well, lately it's been finding out inconsistencies in the marketplace, ferreting out some more than questionable ideas out there that what we're seeing with Bitcoin and a few of these other cryptocurrencies right now. I'm in the opinion where if it's untraceable, it really needs to be regulated in a big way right now.
To get more information and advice from David, visit promillennial.com or call 816-221-7775. That's 816-221-7775. If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at Danny@DannyKlinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you. Bob, it's a pleasure to sit down with you. I've watched you from afar, including very recently in clubs and places like that, and I think our paths have crossed on a couple of occasions, but getting to know you in this format on Danny Klinkscale's Reasonably Irreverent podcast and our Kansas City profiles is, I think, going to be a pleasure. And I always enjoy this and dive into areas where I never, unless I sat around having some beers with that person, would find out.
It's a little early in the morning for that, but I got one in the fridge.
It's all right. Norborn, Missouri, population around 1,000. What was it like being 5-6-year-old Bob Walkenhorst in Norborn?
You know, I tell people that I grew up in Mayberry, but I had both parents. It was small town America at its, at least as near as I know, at its best. You know, when all those little towns that were an hour or so away from a metropolitan area like Kansas City all had their own self-sufficient economies. Lumber yards, car dealerships, grocery stores, dentists, doctors, every town had their own. We would only come to Kansas City maybe once or twice a year, even though we were only an hour away. Just that long ago, which was the 1950s, into the 60s and the 70s, those towns really all just were self-sufficient. And so I feel like I grew up in a really good time to be in a small town, in that there was a real diversity of incomes, education, racial diversity in the little town I grew up in. So I feel like that I was there kind of at the prime of small town America.
And you described it sort of a Mayberry-like existence. Was it, Ozzie and Harriet, Leave It to Beaver type of parental situation, or how would you describe it?
Yeah, very much. My parents were, I think they were a real good example of a good partnership. My dad and I are a lot alike. Even though he's been gone a long time, I can still feel him around me all the time. He loved music, loved working with his hands, treated my mom really well, treated me and my brothers really well, was respected in the community, knew that he felt that sense of duty to his community, that he needed to be a part of it and contribute to it. And I think that I learned that at an early age. So yeah, it really was a very safe and secure and encouraging type of home life that I had.
Brothers?
Get out there and sing, kid. That's what you know how to do. Get out there and sing.
Brothers, older, younger?
One of each. One older, one younger, and they both live out in Oak Grove.
Okay. And where do you stack up age-wise with them?
My little brother's 3 years younger. My older brother's 2 years older.
Oh, okay. And kind of perfect.
Yeah, I am, the middle kid, and we all loved music. I just loved it more.
Right.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? You mentioned your dad loved music. When did you, standard issue, start playing piano lessons, or what? How did it start for you?
Well, my first public performance is when I was 3 years old.
Wow.
I had a ukulele and a coonskin cap, and I stood in front of the Farm Bureau banquet in Norborn, Missouri, and sang 16 Tons by Tennessee Ernie Ford, which to this day I still sing. So,
right. I mean, I know you do a hard rock version of that. I know that. We have something in common. I got my first radio paycheck when I was 5 years old. So,
wow.
So there we go.
You got a paycheck. That guy's got a piece of pie.
That sounds like Norborn.
Yeah,
when did you sort of get the feeling that this might be, you were performed at 3. When did you just have an idea as you were going through elementary school and into your more formative years that this was something that was going to be real?
It was always the thing that I did. Because I started singing in front of people, even though it was just in the small confines of my little town and church and school and Farm Bureau banquets and things like that, the idea of getting up in front of people was real comfortable for me. And it was my identity. That was the thing I did. I was the kid who sang. So it wasn't like there was a decision somewhere along the line that I think I'll do music for a living. I just have never done anything else, and I've never loved anything else, any kind of occupation as much as I've loved that. And it's just been a part of me for such a long time. I can't really separate it from I've learned to separate it from myself. I think that that's something that as you have a longer life as a musician, you learn, okay, that's me, the musician, and this is me, the partner and the father and the member of the community. That there really is a dividing line that you have to learn. I did have a musician friend of mine say, you got to know who you are when you don't have a guitar in your hands. And I thought, that's the best advice I've heard all day.
What were you like as a student, and did you have other interests away from school, or was it just music?
Oh, just like making stuff, that's, my dad was a carpenter, and he was happy when he was building things or painting things or carving things. And I always liked either painting or drawing or making music. Anything that was not a contact sport got me in.
That sounds great. Did you live in Norborn all through your...
Yeah, up till about age 22.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah. So what was a high school existence like in a town like Norborn that was small and, everybody knew everybody? What was high school like?
It was very supportive. The high school band, maybe had 30 or 50 kids in it, but my band director was like, you guys can play complicated things. We just have to practice. And so my school situation was very much believing that you can do these really difficult things if you work hard at them. There was only a few kids in my town that played rock and roll. That was kind of like, ooh, those are the rock and roll guys. And I was always quite fascinated by the older guys, and there were only a few, a little older than me, who were playing in rock and roll bands. And I thought, how do I get to do that? How do I take that first step to play down at the VFW hall at the county seat? It all sounds very quaint now, but that really was my roadmap. It's like, okay, I have a little set of drums. Now how do I get guys to play guitars with me? And I quite enjoyed the trip of figuring out which guy was the guitar player, which guy was the bass player, and having bands in high school and early college days. Yeah.
So did you play, you obviously eventually were a drummer. Did you play drums in the high school band?
I actually started as a drummer. I played drums before I played guitar, and loved the drums, loved Ringo. I'm from that Beatles generation, Ringo and Charlie Watts. And it's like, and even my parents watched the Lawrence Welk show. That was our Saturday night thing. We watched the Lawrence Welk show, and the guy that played the drums in the Lawrence Welk Orchestra, I was always like, man, that's the coolest guy. Well, no one else in the band is cool, but that guy is cool.
That's amazing.
And I should know his name. I'm forgetting it right now.
Yeah,
great drummer.
We didn't do that, thank goodness. You turn it on and then turn it off. So Mitch Miller maybe, but how about high school from a social standpoint? Those small town high schools, and particularly in the 60s and 70s when I was growing up there, it was sports, very sports oriented, but they didn't neglect the arts programs. There was a good art teacher and there was a good music teacher. Our high school band would win awards across the state, and we would go on these little tours and take our high school band to other little high schools and play. So I had my role. I was the guy that played drums. I was the guy that sang. I was the guy that drew pictures. So that was my identity in high school, which was good to have an identity. It's good to have a social system that identifies who you are and lets you be that person. So when did you finally find your guitarist and your bass player and play at the VFW?
Well, I found a guy that owned a guitar that couldn't play it, and I owned drums that he could play. So he took my drums, I took his Rickenbacker and his Fender amp, and so my first band, I was actually the guitarist, and I had just started on guitar, but I could play some amount of guitar. So I actually started in my first band. I was the guitarist.
And what was the name of that band? Do you remember?
That band was called Fantasia.
Whoa!
With a PH.
Wow, there you go.
And strange little story.
Very heavy.
We were very serious about our music, quite influenced by King Crimson and Moody Blues and things like that. So we came up to Damon Studios in Kansas City, which was, in the late 60s, early 70s, and actually going back to the 40s, Damon Studios and the Damon record label was a big deal. I mean, do you know any of that history?
No, I don't.
That you got to check that out. It's a cool story. There was a guy named Vic Damon who bought high top
Not
of the
Vic
line
Damone,
equipment.
Vic Damon.
Vic Damon, yeah. And his son George was the engineer later on, and Vic recorded Marilyn May and a lot of the other Kansas City jazz scene, and then stayed in business and recorded Brewer and Shipley and really a lot of guys my age made their trek to Damon Studios, and I think it was at 14th and Grand or somewhere there, and it was underground. So you went in this little door and you were down under, and they had the best equipment. They had Ampex recording and Neumann mics and a lathe cutter there. They cut your own records. So we came up and recorded, my little Norburn, Missouri band came up and recorded an album, and that album eventually became the holy grail of German record collectors who collect 1970s unreleased American psychedelia. Our band became, it's like, how did that get to Germany? I don't know. But yeah, it's funny, those things in music, where it goes. You have no control where it goes. Throw it out there.
So when did Steve, Rob, and Rich come about, the
Steve,
precursors
Rob, and
to...
Rich, I was living in Branson from the 70s up until 81. I moved to Kansas City in 81. And I moved up here with the idea of, I was already...
Just a quick back, when you were in Branson, did you just do your own thing?
No, I worked at Silver Dollar City.
Oh, okay.
And worked some of the nighttime shows there and really learned show business, you're going to do this every day and you're going to do this for 8 or 12 hours every day. How do you do that, and how do you approach it professionally? How do you do a good job every time you walk out in front of a crowd? How do you... So it was a great training ground. I met a lot of fantastic people during the 70s at Silver Dollar City. Really people who had experience in vaudeville and circuses and all kinds of stuff. So it was a real learning experience for me too. But I wanted to write, I was writing songs, and I needed to be in a bigger city and not quite so rural, country, tourist entertainment type of city to be able to pursue that. And I had ventured up to Springfield and heard Fool's Face, which anybody from the 80s era of Kansas City music scene knows who that is. And they were this incredible 5-piece rock band that did amazing covers and had released 3 albums, and they were great guys, and they had a look, and they were energetic, and I was like, that's what I want to do. So I moved up to Kansas City in 81.
So did you go into music right out of high school and not pursue college, or did you?
No, I went to college. I went to Central Missouri State at Warrensburg for a couple of years, and I was in visual arts there, drawing and painting, and then graduated from Northwest Missouri at Maryville. And I would still be in college if there was a way. I loved going to college. I stretched it out. I think I went 5 years over 7. I would just keep stretching it out. And I'm not quite ready to get out in the real world yet.
Well, I went 4 years over 10.
There you go.
There you go.
Stretch it out.
So you come to Kansas City.
And I see this fantastic music scene, both on the original level. I mean, those bands that I mentioned, Fool's Face and The Secrets from Lawrence, and Kelly and the Kinetics from Lawrence, and the Morels and the Clocks from Wichita, the Morels from Springfield. There are all these bands that were making records. They're making independent records. They were writing original music. We were kind of on the tail end of that pop punk thing, the Elvis Costello Police wave of music. So there's all this energy in this music. And then there were these great local bands, that were mostly cover bands, some of them 100% cover bands, but so there were the Westport scene. I mean, there were within a few blocks, and I know it's still this way to some degree, but there were probably 6 clubs within 3 blocks that all had live music 6 nights a week. And if you could get a job at one of those clubs with your band, you were playing 5 or 6 nights a week, 4 hours a night.
Wow.
And you were getting better. I mean, and it paid the rent. You didn't have to get another job. It's like, wow, I'm a professional musician.
Right.
I'm buying the groceries, and I'm paying the rent, and I'm playing every single night, and I'm getting better at it. So I think I landed in town at a really good time. I mean, from Monday through Saturday, the clubs were all full.
So did you, from that point forward, were you pretty much able to be a professional musician?
Yeah.
And you never had to have a quote-unquote real job?
No, I've had a real job. I mean, besides music. I feel like I've been lucky in that the chapters of my musical life have lined up nicely with the chapters of my personal life, in that some of the members of my band have missed births. You know, they've been out of the country when a baby was born. When Michelle and I got together, it was kind of at one of the chapter breaks for the Rainmakers. So I was home all the time my kids were little. And in fact, I was home solid for 5 years. We had enough money saved. It's like, okay, let's have these babies and let's just stay here. And it was the best money I ever spent, staying home for 5 years.
Wow, that is amazing. I mean, that doesn't sound like a musician.
Well, actually, I think there are a lot of musicians that if you can,
or some people's perception of a musician, maybe,
or at least the kind of the outlaw adventurous side of music. But I think there's a lot of people. I mean, you can look at Paul McCartney, who's been a really good family man. Keith Richards said, I've done it all, and there's nothing as high as having kids. That when you are really there for the experience and say, yeah, that's where you start learning, here's the part of me that's a musician, and here's the part of me that's a human being.
Right.
They're not necessarily always the same thing. And in fact, the musical side can certainly compromise the human being side. So I was lucky in that the band had kind of reached a point where we have to stop for a while. We don't know how long. And that lined up with Michelle and I being together and children that I could stay home for, which I am incredibly grateful that I got that experience. There was nothing that would be worth missing that.
Well, let's get into the rise and not fall, that's not fair, of the
Rainmakers plateau.
Right, after our first time out. We are talking with Bob Walkenhorst from the Rainmakers, and just being Bob Walkenhorst, which has been so cool for the Kansas City music scene for so long, and the Scandinavian music scene, and all these music scenes all over the place. We'll continue right after this.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
Most of us have experienced auto accidents, and it's no fun. And even less fun is trying to work on the insurance aspects afterwards and getting full value after an auto accident. I'm here with David Cowan from WreckExpert.com. And David, you have an unusual and important niche for people after an auto accident.
We have a passion to teach car wreck clients what they deserve. Getting your car repaired only fixes the damage and the paint. Getting paid for your car's loss in value is called diminished value. Chances are you've never heard of this before because most people aren't looking out for you. We help people collect thousands to tens of thousands of dollars for their car's loss in value after the wreck.
And if somebody wants to come to you for that, what's the original assessment cost them?
We offer a free review of any insurance claim to see how we can help.
You can't beat that. Great expertise and assistance in getting full value after an auto accident from David Cowan. Visit WreckExpert.com and learn more. We're here with Michael Barber, the CEO and founder of Microlight Corporation of America, the world leaders in laser therapy. And Michael, tell us a little bit about your product.
Our device is using a particular wavelength and power to reduce pain and swelling. My background is surgical lasers, but I've been involved with this particular device now for about the last 20 years, actually.
And I know that it works because I've had it used on me as well. And tell us about the relationship you have with your company and Canaway.
It's what I call a strategic business relationship in that Canaway, the leader in the field of the cannabinoid systems and CBD oil, but our device used in conjunction with Canaway CBD oil gives a better pain relief outcome for the patient.
And if you want to get that pain relief outcome like I did, you can reach their local representative, Sherry McCants, at 515-208-6312. That's 515-208-6312.
Hey everyone, this is Matt Llewellyn for the 23rd Street Brewery. Thank you so much for supporting local restaurants, especially through this pandemic. And you know what? We're almost through it. At the 23rd Street Brewery, we have brought in a few more tables. You can wear a mask if you want, or not. It's your choice. Other than that, we're open 11:30 every single day. So come see us at the 23rd Street Brewery in Lawrence.
We're here once again with Dr. Brad Woodle from Advanced Sports and Family Chiropractic and Acupuncture. Springtime, good weather's finally here. People want to stay active, and it's your job to make sure that they can stay active, and be healthy.
Danny, we see a lot of not just weekend warriors, but people that every day are having that want to get back to activity. Whether you're starting with walking, jogging, or maybe that first 5K of the year, we want to help you out. We specialize in taking care of all ages, from kids all the way to grandmas and grandpas, but absolutely specialize in getting you back to full function and keeping you in great shape.
So in short, how do we go about doing that?
The first thing is to schedule a consultation with one of our doctors and therapists so we can see how you move and how you're supposed to move. Based on our assessment, we can put together a short treatment plan and a set of goals to help you both feel better, function better, and most importantly, stay better for this year and many years to come.
Learn more at asfca.com/Danny. That's asfca.com/Danny.
If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at danny@dannyclinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you.
And we continue with Bob Walkenhorst and your first band. Of course, you self-produced an album, or you're not Fantasia, the next one, and then you become the Rainmakers. And I saw two different things in research that I did. Did you sign with Polygram or Mercury?
Well, Mercury was one of the labels under the Polygram umbrella. You know, they had, and in Europe, it was not Mercury, it was Polygram. But yeah, that was the parent company, which was headquartered in Switzerland.
So tell the process of being signed by a big label. How did that happen?
Well, I think one of the main differences between the music business in the 80s and the music business now is that there was a roadmap back then. You played locally, you honed your craft, you learned how to write songs, then you started expanding your geographic circle a little bit. You'd play the surrounding college towns. Then you would venture to the next metropolitan area. How will St. Louis or Chicago respond to a Kansas City band? And you just keep spreading your circle out, and then you start reaching out to the next professional levels. You need professional booking agencies. You need a professional management. And then those people would take the step to the record label, say, we've got something here that it's proven, they've got thousands of people fan base, they've got original songs, let's make a record. And so it was pretty much this linear path. You take this step, get that accomplished, go on to the next step. There's not such a defined roadmap anymore for young musicians, which is really hard. It's just so much more unknown. Is your YouTube video going to be your ticket to being a professional musician? For a lot of people, it is. Right. Is being picked up on a soundtrack. There's just so many different ways, but there's no one way. And back in the 80s when we were rising up in the music business, there was really kind of one way that it worked.
Was there a particular person who came to a show, or was there somebody who had a tip on that, or was there a night where, okay, this is the big night, there was so-and-so's coming from New York?
There was a particular person in our life that without that person, it may not have gone the same way. In fact, I'm certain it would not have. And he died a couple years ago. He was a young guy named Chip Hooper. He was from Chicago, and he contacted us when he was 22 years old. He was an agent in Chicago. And he was just working for this little agency, and he had this idea that if he could become the exclusive representation for the hot local band in each metropolitan area in the Midwest, then he would leverage that. If you're going to book Steve, Bob, and Rich, if you're going to book the hot band in Kansas City, then you have to also take a date from this band from Minneapolis. You got to give them a shot. So he was really smart. He was really energetic. And he was just this super talk young guy who was going to take over the world. And we clicked, and he was the guy that said, okay, here's what you need to do. We got to put you in touch with this person. And Chip went on to be the top person in his profession. He was the booking agent for Aerosmith and Fish and Huey Lewis and the News. And he rose to the top of his profession and was just a great guy. And I feel like our band was also lucky in that you can talk to a lot of people who went through the record company, professional management experience and there's someone along the line that screws them over, and we didn't have anybody screw us over. You know, trying to make records on the national scale is like going to the horse races. I mean, anything can happen. Some people win big, some people lose big, some people land in the middle somewhere. And we landed in the middle somewhere, which was pretty lucky. But we never had anybody screw us over. In fact, we had people work so hard for the good of our band. And we worked really hard and we were dependable. And so, you know, we don't really have very many great stories of debauchery and doom and gloom on the road. We just worked hard, and we had people that worked really hard with us. And so it's not really interesting, but I'm glad that's our story because I'm here to still tell it. You know?
Right. And just talk about, it sounds like your relationship with your bandmates was sort of a nice one.
It was, and I got to give them a lot of credit for putting up with me because I always have been a bit of a control freak. Just because I care about, you know, this is the best way it should be done. And I've gotten a lot better at listening to other people's opinions. But yeah, they trusted me or allowed me or put up with me to make a lot of the decisions for the band and to be the songwriter and do the interviews and all that, which that was, you know, they worked out okay. And I really, in just the past decade or the past 8 years that the Rainmakers have been back together, I have come to a much greater appreciation for each person in the band and for how much better the music is if you're not the control freak. If you leave it up to other people to have genuine input into the creative process and leave some of it up to chance. You know, to be comfortable with,
right,
we don't know this song yet, let's record it. And great things will happen. And I'm glad that I've kind of learned to not be so controlling. I think it's been better for me, and it's certainly been better for the people around me, and hopefully better for the music too.
The look on your face looks like a person who feels like they matured or whatever. And was it your natural personality to be the person who would lead the band? Or were the other guys naturally deferential, or did you have to kind of almost fight for that position?
A great rock and roll band is democratic to an extent, you know, and that's where always the tension comes in. You are a band of musicians, you're a band of brothers if you have that personal rapport. And you're going to go through a whole lot of experiences together, and you're going to go through a whole lot of boredom together, and you're going to ride miles and miles and miles in a van together. So you better get along to some extent. And our band did. You know, we were not teenagers. We were, we were in our 30s, and we respected each other and took care of each other, and no one was crazy. You know, again, we don't have great stories because no one in our band was crazy. When we were playing the bars in Kansas City, it was a very democratic band. I mean, you're playing 4 hours a night. There's time for everybody to sing.
Right.
As you narrow your scope down to where you're going to be making original music, well, who's writing the songs? Well, and then, who's writing the best songs? And that gets a little touchy. No one wants to be told that someone else is writing the best songs. But it eventually comes down to, you know, Bob's the lead singer, Bob's writing the songs. You're the lead guitar player, you're the bass player, and you're the drummer, and we all have our roles to do. Again, I've learned to express my appreciation better than I used to, and I love playing with those guys.
What was the decision to make you the Rainmakers? How did that come about?
Well, we had been this three-piece band, Steve, Bob, and Rich, and I had been the drummer. And as it was now a band about songwriting, I didn't want to be the drummer anymore. It's like that just doesn't work visually. I mean, you know, this was the time of the big rock concert, come out on stage, go insane for as long as you can, you know, whip up the crowd. And it's hard to do that from behind a drum kit when you're the lead singer. So I wanted to move to guitar, and we knew who we wanted to be on drums. We wanted Pat Tomic to play drums, who had been in The Secrets. We were talking about The Secrets. And Pat is just one of the easiest people to work with I've ever known in my life. You know, he'll try it any way you want to try it. He'll have really good ideas. And so Pat became our drummer as we are making the first record. So it wasn't like we had a history as a 4-piece band. We really started making the record as a 3-piece band, and Pat's joining the band right at the same time as our drummer.
How about the name?
When we were recording our first album in Memphis at Ardent Studios, which was just one of the top studios in the country, a legendary place, with Terry Manning, who was a wonderful person, wonderful producer, engineer, we didn't have a band name. We knew we were going to change the band name before the first album came out. So we had these long pieces of white paper taped up on the walls, and we just started writing down possibilities. And we had dozens and dozens of them.
A few pop into your head?
None that I care to repeat.
Okay.
Well, the Missouri Mules was one of them.
Yeah, I've heard that.
One of them was Missouri Breaks, which was the name of a Jack Nicholson movie around that.
And was the band Missouri already?
Yeah, Missouri.
That was kind of a thing then. Kansas, Missouri,
Kansas,
Boston,
Missouri.
whatever.
And we knew we wanted something Midwestern, but I didn't want something as literal as the Missouri Mules. And
good call.
Yeah, I don't know. If you'd been around long enough, you might have gotten used to that too. But the Rainmakers, it seemed like, well, that kind of thematically fits these songs. Where there's, I think, particularly on our first album, there's this edge of political commentary woven together with orneriness and a sense of fun, and also a little bit of sense of gloom, of dread and gloom in there too, which is a weird thing to weave together, but that seemed to be what we had. And the idea of a rainmaker who comes to town, and do you trust this guy? Is he ripping everyone off, or is he actually delivering something you need? We thought, well, this kind of works together. So when we landed upon the Rainmakers and had some time to live with it, we thought, yeah, I think 30 years from now we'll be okay with this band name.
In writing songs, there's a couple of different ways that people go about it, and sometimes they do both. But a lot of times, songwriters write songs about things in their life, or things that are very personal in their life. And other songwriters, Mark Knopfler, one of my favorites from Dire Straits, comes to mind. They write songs about things that have absolutely nothing to do with them, preachers' wives in the 1800s or whatever. Yours is a little bit of a mix, but you seem to write songs that aren't necessary, even though they might have a personal touch, they are stories apart from you, per se?
No, I don't think so. I think that I'm very much in the story or close to the story, but I try to write it in a way that the listener sees themselves in that story. Because
see, you fooled me.
Well, but I think that's what good art does. It makes the listener or the viewer feel like they're in it. And I can't say that I consciously did that,
right?
But I eventually realized that that's what I was doing as a songwriter, and that's what we were doing as a band. Is we were making songs that people were like, "I did that. I lived that." You're singing. You're telling my story. And when you realize that if you just tell your own story, you're probably telling somebody else's story too. You find the things that are the common experiences and write about that. That's what resonates.
I guess what I was getting at a little bit was that you're not a rainmaker. I mean, but you portray a rainmaker. Yeah, that's possible. Anything's possible. All right. So since I was basically 2/3 wrong, let's move on. So you put your first album out, and there's really tremendous critical acclaim of this record, and it doesn't, and the record did pretty well. Mm-hmm. Did it end up being in any way frustrating to you that your band was so well received critically and did well, but you didn't become superstars per se?
We didn't? God, Danny, you're breaking my heart.
Well, for our area, also, I wrote this when I did the piece about No Romance a couple of weeks ago, which included No Romance. For people in our area, it's difficult. Kansas Cityans, I think, do think of the Rainmakers in that way.
I think Kansas Cityans of a certain age.
Right.
I mean, music is such a generational thing that there are young people in this town, avid music fans, who have never heard of our band, and that's okay.
Right.
That's the part you can't get frustrated about or be indignant about, because music is generational. Whatever you listen to between the time you're 15 and 30, that's going to be your soundtrack. And I hope you can keep your mind open to new things. I've had a hard time doing that. I've made myself be listening to newer music, so I'm not Yeah, play me one more Rolling Stones song. No, there's got to be new music for each generation. Right. I have certainly had times in my life where I thought, God, I wish this had been more successful. But I've had more times in my life where I'm like, I think this worked out okay. Right. I think I got the right amount of rock and roll stardom and celebrity. I got to experience that. There were times where, I could go any place in Kansas City and somebody would stop me, recognize me, and it was always within polite confines. I never was mobbed or anything. Right. But then I've also just had the freedom to go to the lumber yard and buy dressed in rags and buy whatever I want. I don't have an image to keep up, and I've got to have a normal and comfortable life and be part of my community and be part of my children's lives. So all in all, I'm really okay with my story. I know that it could have gone much worse. It could have gone much better. This is the way it went. Be okay with that.
I guess part of what I was getting at is that like Newsweek called what's the exact quote? I have it here. The most auspicious debut album of the year. Mm-hmm. Rolling Stone had high praise for it. There's things all over the place for it. And this second album, the same thing, which is actually shows that there was a pretty good degree of fame, because I had been 5 years removed from Kansas City and I discovered that album when I lived in upstate New York. Mm-hmm. But to be told by revered critics and everything that your stuff's great, and then it doesn't quite explode, that didn't bother you?
At different times it has bothered me, and at different times it has not bothered me at all. I think that if there was anything that our band should have done differently, I think, guys, that's the thing in anyone's life. What would you have done differently to make the story have a different ending? For the most part, I can't think of anything we would have done differently. We had a record label and people that advised us that were right about 85% of the time. They had a pretty good record, and they were allowing us to be who we were. It's like the songs we were writing, the way we were playing these songs, bands on the coasts can't do that. Right? They are not from here. They can't write with this perspective. And we luckily had people that recognized that. You're doing something unique. You're writing with a voice from the Midwest. Keep doing that. We'll encourage you. We'll support you. Keep doing that. So, we couldn't have done that differently. It's like, should we have written different songs? Well, no. These are the songs we wrote. We worked really hard. We had great experiences. I think the only thing we could have done differently was rest. I think that we had a little bit of an attitude from our management of the golden goose. Let's kill the golden goose. Let's get the egg out. They should have, and I should have, and the band should have said, "Hey, we've got to take some breaks in here, or we're going to totally burn out." Right. Which is kind of what happened. We kind of hit the fatigue wall, because we were working all the time, and if we weren't on the road, we were in a studio, and if we weren't in the studio, I was somewhere holed up writing. Right. It just never ended. And so after 5 years, which doesn't seem like a very long time, really, but really after 5 years.
But if it's 5 years of 200 constant dates a year and stuff like that, that's a long time.
We should have paced ourselves a little better. That's the only thing I could think we should do differently. And like I said earlier, when you play the national music game, it's like going to the races. There's so many things out of your control. Our first single was released, Let My People Go, and it did great. It was getting radio play across the country.
Top 20 in England.
Well, when the radio stations find out that they're playing a record that doesn't exist, they stop playing it. Okay, we'll fix that glitch. Get the record printed. Well, then our second single, we're going to bring it home with this one. Well, Bruce Springsteen releases his 3-album live set the very same day our single comes out. Well, all the radio stations in the country, of their top 20 slots, 15 of them are Bruce Springsteen. Well, it's the boss. Of course you're going to play Bruce Springsteen. So, there's just so much of it that's out of your control. All you can do is be at peace with the parts that were in your control. Right. We made good songs. We worked really hard. We had great people. The rest of it is up to chance.
So talk about the end of that chapter. When you decided to, shut it down for a while as the Rainmakers.
We made 3 albums on Mercury, the major label deal. You were talking about the about being successful in England. We were on top of the pops, and our records sold inversely. With each album release in America, we would sell slightly less, and with each album release, the same albums being released in Europe, they would each one sell slightly more. So we were going uphill in Europe when we kind of hit the wall of fatigue for the band, but also the label ran into some financial difficulties and said, well, guys, we love you, but we can't afford you anymore.
Right.
And so we were dropped from our labels. And that happens to a lot of bands. Mm-hmm. And that's, again, a point of critical timing. Do you have the energy and the emotional strength to start this over? We're going to find a new label. We're going to start this process all over again. And we didn't. And I think if we had been more well rested, we might have. But we were just exhausted, and it was kind of like, let's call it a day for a while. And I don't know how long for a while is going to be. So we took a couple years off, and during that time is when I got married.
I was going to ask you that.
Family. Yeah. So it was at the end of that, the band ended, and then my family started, which that's good timing. So
tell me about meeting your wife. Tell me about meeting your wife.
Well, she was she worked here in Kansas City. She worked at one of the clubs that we played at regularly, and it took us 10 years to kind of get our lives in the same place at the same time. And when it worked out really well. So we have had a great marriage and a really interesting marriage and great kids and now grandkids, and so I feel like I won the lottery there. Our children are little, and I'm taking a little break from music, but we still have interest coming from Norway and from Germany and Canada. We have interest all outside the U.S. But the band makes another record. In fact, we make 2 more records that we record and produce on our own, and those are released in Europe, and then they're sold as an import in the U.S., which is just ironic that people in Kansas City have to order the $30 import to hear their local band. But that's what happened. And so after those 2 records and some more, a little bit of touring in the U.S. and several trips to Europe, then we really called it a day and broke up in 1998, I think, was actually our final gig. So we take 13 years off and raise kids, and they get grown up, and people have jobs. And you'd ask if I ever had a real job. I worked for about 10 years in video production. I learned how to edit and write and do all those things that you do to make commercials and films or training films and all kinds of boring stuff. But it was fun. It was a good job. I enjoyed, again, you're just making stuff. Because as long as I can make stuff, I'm pretty happy.
Right.
And stayed, had a regular schedule, stayed home. And then, what do you know? Your kids are grown.
How much music musicians do music. I mean, my wife's an opera singer. She was a professional for a long time. She still sings all the time. How much music was in your life, or did that lapse a little bit for a while?
I had 5 years where I didn't perform anywhere, which right now sounds like, wow, how'd you go 5 years? But yeah, I had 5 years where I didn't play at all. Now, when you're a writer, and particularly a songwriter, because songs are so short, there's always little tunes creeping through your head, and ooh, there's a title of a good song. So I was always making notes, and hey, what do you know? I finished a song. So over those 5 years, I was still a musician in my head, but I just wasn't out playing anywhere. And I was having a regular job and a very orderly life and raising kids and having a great relationship. So eventually, as the kids get their own lives going, they're older, they're teenagers or something, and then there's time for music again. So it kind of snuck up on me, and we started playing at Malloy Brothers when it was Malloy Brothers up in the Westport Shopping Center, and started doing a Wednesday night thing there. And I was making music with Jeff Porter, and we had, it was going real well, and so we decided we're going to make a duo album, and half of Jeff's songs, half of my songs, and it's still to this day a very, very nice record. I'm very proud of that record. Well, we decided, what the heck, let's go to Norway and play these songs, and just going to book a little tour of Norway. Just Jeff and I go, and the first show is in Oslo. And we walk out on stage and we play one of our songs, and it's, very well received. And we play a Rainmaker song, and the place just erupts. And I'm like, oh, wow, I forgot about this. I forgot about this. And so after that trip, I decided, well, could we have another Rainmakers trip? Just a trip to Norway. Go play the Rainmaker songs in Norway. So this is 2011. There's 2010. Yeah, it's 2010, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, 2011 will be 25 years since we released our first record. That's a good anniversary. Let's do a 25-year anniversary.
I was trying to think of this. I know now, you and I ran across each other at the airport, and I was trying to figure out where it was, when it was, and now I know it was 2010 because I went and covered the Ryder Cup in 2010. That's why I would have been at the airport. And, of course, you're unmistakable. And I went over and we talked a little bit, and you were headed to Norway. So now I know. Now I know.
Oh, I knew you and I had talked somewhere. So, at the airport.
So now I know the date. There we go. That fits right in. And so you decided to do this kind of you went and got the reception for the one Rainmaker song, and then what is it like as sort of an entrepreneur to say, hey, we're going to do a Rainmakers tour. We're going to go to Norway. We know there's an audience there. How does that work?
Well, in the 13 years that we were broken up, the media had changed a lot. The internet came into existence. When the band broke up the first and second times, there was still no internet. So that changes everything. And the technology of music, downloads were just starting in 2011, starting to kind of become into existence. People were still buying CDs. Our actual plan was, let's just go brush up on the old songs. Let's go to Norway once. Let's just have a great time, and then we'll come home and call it a day again.
Right.
Well, in those 13 years, we had all become better musicians. We had become better people, more well-rounded, more accommodating, and I think I had become a better band leader, acknowledging people's contributions, desiring their contributions. Man, what do you hear? What do you want this to do? And we had such a good time making the first record. Well, okay, so we planned to have this tour. That's all we're going to do. We're going to go on tour.
Right.
Well, being the money grubber that I am, it's like, well, we ought to sell as much crap as we can while we're there. Okay, well, let's make a new record.
Right.
Okay, well, yeah, let's just knock this out. They'll buy it. Well, I hadn't written any songs. Okay. Better get to work and write some songs. So I decided, okay, I'm going to write for the Rainmakers again, and I got to do it now. And I think we made one of the best records we've ever made, just because we had no expectations, we had no pressure, and we had no reason. It was either do it for the love of the music, or don't do it.
Right.
And we got together at Pat Tomic, our drummer's house, who has a studio in his home, and he was actually set up in the living room. And we recorded in his living room, and wires everywhere, and pizza and beer, and let's learn the next song, record it. And it's one of my favorite Rainmakers experiences, and I think some of the best music we ever made is our, what you might call a comeback record,
right,
called 25 On, that was made in 5 days, recorded in 5 days. We would just learn the song, record it, learn the song, record it. And we had such a good time. We're like, oh, well, don't stop now. You may have gotten all your egos out of the way, and you may have gotten your band leader in check, and everyone's having a great time. We're making good music. Well, why stop now? So yeah, we did I think four or five trips to Norway. Started playing around Kansas City. Did a few other excursions Midwest up to Minneapolis. Over to St. Louis a couple times, and kind of realized, well, this is how far we want to drive, and this is how far we don't want to drive.
Right.
We'll get on the airplane, but driving across the country, I don't think we want to do that anymore. And so we made a second album in 2014, Monster Movie, which was a lot of fun, and actually is my favorite Rainmakers record of all. It accomplished everything I ever wanted a record to be. It's really political. And it was written before the whole era of Donald Trump, and yet the word Trump actually appears in one of the songs. But there's all this thing, Monster Movie, about the monster that is our political climate, and how it just kind of it can devour everything good. So there's a lot of, I think, very relevant political commentary on that album. And there's also a lot of fun on that album. There's a lot of funny stuff on there. We co-wrote some of the songs, Everybody gets a lead vocal turn except Pat. He doesn't do a lead vocal, but it was just another good experience, and it ends up with a piece of art, piece of musical art that I am extremely happy with. Like, there you go. That's what I wanted that record to sound like. And we made one more album after that where we decided we would all pick out our favorite obscure covers,
right,
or more or less obscure covers. Some of them were top records, but do the Rainmakers version of it. So we did an album called Cover Band, which was all these odd choices from the Carter family to Tennessee Ernie Ford.
It's pretty good, pretty damn good.
Yeah.
I have to. I'm going to do that at the end. I'll wait on that. When you were during the entire span of the Rainmakers, but especially at the point where you're making the records with the record company, there's a weird dynamic in there. The fact that you would get some presence or want to be interviewed or whatever by Christians because of some of the the tenor of the songs, be it the fire and brimstone type aspect of the songs, and Christian radio maybe had some interest in this type of thing. Was that ironic to you?
It was ironic in that I think when you're really trying to write honestly about where you're from and reflect the place that you're from and the people that you are from, religion has always been a deep part of life in the Midwest. And so, and religion was a big part of my life growing up, just traditional church, and then going through, my own quests for some kind of truth and trying to figure out what's real and what's not real in Christianity. That's crept into the songs. Well, if you just mention Jesus or Moses in a song, some Christian writer who's not paying attention is going, oh, well, here's a Christian band. Oh, no, we're not a Christian. But I would end up, with lots of interviews. I don't know we ever did Christian radio. I think they had figured out by the time they listened to the song, nope, this is not a Christian band.
Right.
But the interviewers would want to talk to me about my journey of faith or however they saw it, or what was I trying to say. And finally, one interviewer says, well, if I'm going to, he told me that he thought, if I was going to write about my Christian faith, that I should just do it much clearer and just really testify. And I'm like, why don't you start your own band and you write the songs the way you want to? How dare you tell me how you think I should do?
So his feeling was that you were really like a devout Christian,
well,
and you were
me to be.
and you were sort of using subterfuge to not make it that type of song.
I don't know what he thought. He thought I should do it. However I was doing it, I should do it differently. It's like, yeah, thanks, Mr. Music Critic.
And Stephen King. Is like the writer is an unabashed fan.
Yeah.
I assume you've met the man now.
Yeah.
And he's quoted some of your lyrics in a couple of his books and things like that, and continues to tweet about the Rainmakers. That's pretty cool.
We had released our first album and we had toured relentlessly, and it was late 1986. So we're finally getting home. We're going to be off the road for a while. Our agent calls and he says, I've got this offer to go to Bangor, Maine and play a single show. It's for this author, Stephen King. And I'm like, yeah, I know who Stephen King is. And I said, man, we just got off the road. And he goes, well, he'll fly you out there. All you got to do is get to the gig and play the gig and come back home, and he'll pay you really well. I'm like, oh, okay. So we fly, and there's a blizzard. And so we can't even land in Bangor. We have to land in Portland. We get 2 rental cars. We throw all of our stuff in the cars, and we drive like mad through a Maine blizzard in January to get to Bangor. And we get to the Civic Center in the afternoon. We walk in. There's food. There's the stage. There's the PA, and there's not a soul in that building. There's no one in that building. The doors open. We all look. We're like, ooh, it's a haunted Civic Center. Stephen King. And finally he shows up, and this was, still during kind of Stephen's wild years. But he was real nice, and he had brought us there because he had bought the local radio station, and he had them play all the music that he wanted to hear. And he wanted to see if he jammed on a new band, and he picked ours, if the people would turn out for a concert. Good plan, except for the blizzard. So we do our show. I think we had about 200 people in the 2,000-seat auditorium. And I look up in the very top rafters, and there in the very top rafters huddling over his grocery bag full of tall boys is Stephen King sitting at the top of the auditorium. And he comes back and backstage after the show, and he says, I'm working on a new book. I'm gonna put some of your lyrics in it. And I'm like, yeah, that's nice. I'll believe that when I see it. And sure enough, the next book comes out, and each half of the book starts out with a Rainmaker song. Not in the story, but as like the title, kind of the title page of each half. And then he so a couple other lyrical references popped up in the next book, and yeah, it was just nice to know that somebody of that renown was listening to your music, and that it meant something to them, to where they wanted to reference you in their song. And then years later, after we do Monster Movie, he tweets, hey, Rainmakers are still kicking ass, and Bob Walkenhorst rules. And my daughter saw that, and she puts it on Facebook, and she goes, my dad's cooler than your dad.
Well, that's probably a good time to talk about your daughters, and you have grandkids now, but now you're making music with one of your daughters. Yeah,
our younger daughter, Una, is, she's always been the quiet, sensitive, adventurous spirit. And when she finished high school and did a couple years of college here in town at Penn Valley, she decided she was going to move to New York. And so she lives in New York for a year, and then she comes back and works a little in Kansas City, and then decides she's going to go out and travel around the country with her guitar and just see America. So she does that for
I like that plan.
Yeah. And we were talking about you have to enjoy your own company. She was doing that trip all alone and would stay at Airbnbs, or then she discovers couchsurfing.com, where people just let you stay for free. She stayed on a porch with a goat. She stayed out in a teepee and wrote songs all that time. Comes back to Kansas City and decides that New Orleans is where she's going to land. So she was in New Orleans for almost 3 years. And then a little more than a year ago, she decided that chapter was coming to an end, and she didn't know where she wanted to live next. But she didn't really think she wanted to live in Kansas City. She, it's that thing of, well, you just don't go back home, go somewhere else. And I said, well, we've got this, this little space in time where I'm still healthy and making music, and you're hitting your stride as a songwriter. Let's make some music together, and then you can move on to whatever comes next for you. So that was a little more than a year ago. And
so was she receptive immediately to that?
Yeah, she actually was. I think that she saw that as, that makes sense. And we started, while she was still in New Orleans, kind of sending some song ideas back and forth, and realizing, oh yeah, this will be good. Both her unique voice as a writer and as a singer, and how it made me look at music from a different angle. Instead of Bob's writing a song, band learn the song. We're not really co-writing. Una and I weren't really co-writing, but we were shaping each other's songs and shaping the choice of what songs we were going to use. What's going to be good to harmonize on, and ended up with an album that I'm so happy with. And I know that as I become an ancient old man, I'm going to be, that record's always going to be in a special little place in my heart, because I made it with our daughter. We've performed several times together, took a little tour to Norway together, and Michelle went along. Mm-hmm. Had a great time. We've been playing with some other musicians, augmenting our sound. We've got a cellist, Sasha Groshong, who's just an incredible rock and roll cello player. Any kind of cello you want, she can do it. And so getting to do these, some musical experimenting that I've never got to do, play with a cellist. And it has been great to share that with our child. I've had so many musicians go, oh my God, I can't imagine what that's like. And I said, yeah, it's pretty special, because here's this baby that you held, and now it took me a while to get into the mindset of, this is my musical partner. This is not me telling the girl how to sing. I had to get past that dad part of, well, I've done this for a long time. I know how we should do it. No, finally, when I got to the other side of that, was like, oh, hear it from her side. It made me learn a lot, and it made me adapt my technique, and made me be a better guitar player and a better singer to make it work with her voice. So it's been great. It's been really a good thing to do.
Couple more things before we wrap up. I could talk to you all day, but the dogs need feeding. First of all, your art. You're a painter, and how did you mentioned that right from the outset that you did? Have you done that throughout your life, or as you had more time, and maybe took some time away from music? How did that all develop?
Yeah, there's been chapters where there was not enough hours in the day to paint, but I went to college for visual art and actually have a degree that says Bob can paint. Go ahead and get a job with this thing that says Bob can paint. But when the music really kicked in the 80s, there was just not enough time to paint.
Right.
I mean, I would occasionally do some sketches or stuff, but there just wasn't enough time. And then after I had a family and had a regular job, and that job came to an end, my video work kind of came to an abrupt end. It's like, well, what am I going to do for a living now? It's like, well, you know how to paint and you know how to make songs. Maybe you should just do that. So I disciplined myself and got down to actual putting out some paintings and figuring out ways to market it to the audience that I have. Proudly, right. With the Rainmakers have a beer audience, not a champagne audience. So you got to make beer paintings. Try to make good beer paintings.
There you go.
No, I love my audience. They have made my life very, very comfortable. So yeah, I paint and during the winter I try to. That's the painting time. Although this past winter I got a little sidetracked on some other projects. So
right.
I've got some shows coming up this year down at the Farmhouse Restaurant in June, and then at the Unitarian Church in November, and Westwood City Hall in December. And those are all free spaces. I haven't quite ventured into the true galleries in Kansas City.
Right.
It seems like
Plaza Art Fair in your future.
Well, that's an awful lot of work, and it's an awful lot of gamble. And
right.
I've attended it so many times. I've often dreamed that would be so much fun. When I actually started looking into it, it's like, yeah, it'd be an awful lot of work.
And finally, your hair. As a person who's always been pretty fastidious about my hair, and I had very long hair for a long time, and now I don't have as much hair as I would like. I'm envious. I'll say that. Your shock of white hair now is unmistakable. The glorious hair on the Tornado album is spectacular. First of all, has that always kind of been a thing for you, or is it just are you one of these creeps who just doesn't care about his hair, but it looks great anyway?
I guess I'm a creep. I pay very little attention to it. Never have. It's just never been. It just is there, and I'll whack it off now and then and cut it back a little bit, but I don't pay too much attention to it.
But it is a signature, you know that.
It kind of is. I mean, I know if I didn't have it, I would probably notice that. But yeah, it's just always kind of been there, so I don't really think about it too much.
You seem very, very passive about talking about it. But one more question: since you say you didn't care about it, it seems like your change to having a shock of white hair just happened organically, and you didn't go through a phase where you said, well, I'd really rather have brown hair, or what?
I did. Towards the end of the Rainmakers first chapters, my hair was starting to turn gray, and I experimented with coloring it. And pretty soon the gray said, "You're not going to keep up with me," and then that kind of coincided with starting a family and being out of the public eye,
right?
And being comfortable with I'm getting to be older, and I'm okay with that. So yeah, I would probably I can be vain enough to say I'm not a vain person, but if I didn't have my shock of white hair, I'd probably be more self-conscious about it. But I again, it's just luck. It's like I really don't even have to think about my hair because it's just always there, and so I can be kind of vain enough to say I don't really care about it.
There you
go. Which is its own kind of vanity.
Well, it looks fantastic. Let me just say,
folks, I wish you could see it.
That's a goofy, good way to end a fascinating conversation, Bob. And I really enjoyed the journey. And I went and it'd been too long. I went and saw you play the other night, and the fans just eat it up with a spoon, and you seem to still to.
Well, and I've tried to stay alive in it, where instead of just getting up and hacking out a song the same way, experimenting with the songs and playing it solo and playing it with my daughter. And then the Rainmakers will still do our show. I think it's June 8th at Knuckleheads, and then we kind of really get to put the power behind it. And I feel lucky that I have the options to do my music in different ways, in different venues and different levels of volume and all the different, and a cello or whatever, that I got freedom to try all these things. I feel real lucky with that. So thanks, Kansas City, for giving me a musical home.
And I feel real lucky to talk to you.
You too, Danny. Thanks.
This podcast was made possible by our great sponsors like
Easton Roofing, the presenting sponsor of Kansas City Profiles at the Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Easton Roofing, where integrity matters.
We hope you enjoyed the latest Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Come back soon for something fresh and new.